The people who are going to watch this video are going to be online course creators who want the basics
Yes.
of how do I effectively build an online course that is going to deliver what I'm promising.
The key things that you want to do is you want to start with those three major course objectives that you want your students to get out
So
of. You want your first course to be so good that they want to come back and take your next one and pay for it. So
now,
you want to give them actionable things that they can take out and go work on now, but then they're going to have to come back as they take action to get more information from you.
and I think it's important not to try too hard. People get the
Yeah,
concept. And if you get
yeah.
focused on this one thing, you'll have a course that you wrote 8 months ago and you've done nothing about.
And that's the key thing. You want to take action. You could spend hours trying to make your course materials look perfect. We want you to have the basics down so you can go out and put that course out in the world and have people start taking it so they can learn from you.
So I've got 2 documents I'm going to walk through with you. You can tell me
Okay.
just on first glance, should we hit this first or yours? So this is yours, and you've got the checklist and other tips. And then what I've got is, and I've got the source
Oh,
here,
very cool. I like
Bloom's
that.
taxonomy. And so I wanted to cover
Mhm.
that because that's what I use to inform my creating of this
Of
course for
this.
creative
Okay.
finance for realtors. So which of these 3 things should we touch first?
Well, let's start on Bloom's taxonomy because that's something that's like a higher level thing, and I'm glad you're bringing it up because I
Yes.
was going bare basics, but this is really important in education to consider.
Yes, because if you don't start with Bloom's taxonomy, you might jump to conclusions. And my tendency, I'm a very technical person. My
Yeah.
tendency is to overwhelm people with details and facts just because this is all exciting. The stuff's firing off in my head. And I'm like, you got to do this and you got to think about that. But that's not,
I'm the same way. And what I did is as I'm coming up with ideas for the Zoom that I want to do for the community, I'm writing everything down, but I'm realizing I'm gonna have to scale it
yeah,
down to
yeah. See, so have you heard of
taxonomy is important.
good, have you heard of the curse of knowledge?
I don't think I've heard of it expressed in that way, but I know I think I know what you mean.
There's a book, and I'm not going to find it while I glance off camera, am I? It's called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And there's
Hmm.
newer versions out of it, but it talks about 6 key elements. And one of those things is that educators have a hard time when they're experts in something communicating to a beginner. And so if you're a level 10 knowledge, you have a lot of trouble communicating level 1 or 2 knowledge, but they can't get to where you are without first going where you've been to help them get there.
I actually did a double master's program when I decided I wanted to be a college counselor because I was already working at a community college and I saw so many professors who were just like experts and geniuses in their field and knew so much, but their teaching styles were not translating that to their students. And I didn't want to be that person. That's why I did the double master's in my counseling as well as how
Yeah.
to teach.
Yeah. When you're an expert, it's like the old ball and chain got to get strapped around your ankle. Like, slow down. You'll
Yeah.
lose your audience and you won't get invited back, and people won't like your course if they can't follow along. Now, you also need
Yeah,
to, I think for an online course, you also need to provide a fast track option so that they can be like,
for sure.
so, okay,
I
cool.
agree.
Well, let's start with Bloom's taxonomy to
Yeah,
explain
let's start with that.
what the structure, and are you independently capable of explaining it, or should we like read stuff online? How do you want to do that?
Well, I'm a visual person, so I think that we should have the picture up as we're talking about it.
Perfect.
And
Okay.
that's an important lesson for people to think about is you're going to have different types of learners. You're going to have the people who are auditory, so they could just listen to you and me talking and be totally okay. Then there's the people like me who are visual who they can hear you talking, but if they don't see the list as you're talking about it, it makes it much more difficult for them to understand. Also, having the visual up on the screen helps me focus as
Gives you
you
something to
talk.
focus. Got it.
And then the other thing to think about is kinesthetic learners. So you can ask people to do something movement wise. Now, how do you do that in an online class? I often will ask my students to take notes as they read, or in my video lectures, I will have a moment where I say, now I want you to pause and I want you to write down the top 3 things, blah, blah, blah. So they're actively doing some
Yeah.
sort of movement while they're in the course. So that's a
Yeah,
good point too.
I have a sketch pad. Like when I was in high school, I would be drawing, but I would be listening because if my hand is moving, I'm not falling asleep. Actually, there's a
Yeah.
book, another book, if you want to read this, not you, but anybody listening, The Way They Learn. I think it's by Cynthia Tobias years ago. Why do I remember the name? I read
That's
it
amazing.
like 12 years ago, once or twice, and it was talking about the ones that learn by moving and listening and visual and other things like that. And so when I was in college, that gave me permission to stand in the back of the room and kind of just lean against the wall and pace back and forth a little bit and sketch and
Yep.
draw, because that is how, like, sitting in class and listening to the professor is so freaking boring to
Yeah,
me
and I
that I
didn't
fall
know
asleep.
this when I was going to college. I actually went to UCLA, not because I wanted to be by the beach, not because of any prestigiousness or anything like that. But what I didn't know is the University of California system in California is designed as a research-based university, and a lot of their courses at that time were taught in a pure lecture format. So someone like me who's a kinesthetic visual learner, it was some of those classes were
Terrible.
torture.
Yeah. So I like listen, I found a downloader for Kajabi courses and things like that. And when I join a
Mhm.
mentorship or anything like that, I'll go get my lessons, do the little hack to download the lessons. I'm not distributing them. I'm saving them on my computer or my phone so I can play them
Yeah,
audio while I mow the yard or do something. And every
yeah,
once in a while I'll look at the screen and like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Okay. And that's me. I want to be doing and listening.
yeah, yeah. And there's even learners who are social learners. And that's why sometimes, even though me personally, I'm not a huge fan of group projects, I will still include some sort of group activity to help those social learners as well.
I felt like I always carried the team on those. I hated those.
I hated those too.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Let me share my screen and we're going to look at Bloom's taxonomy. And I did a
Yes.
bunch of research. And so this is a Google Doc that I put together from
Oh,
multiple online
cool.
sources. It's pretty short. I can share it. It's no problem. It's 2 pages because I
That's
wanted this to
perfect.
inform me and anyone who helps me to build courses. I want to be on the same page. Don't build a syllabus that does not line up with this. So,
Yeah. And it's important because it works the same as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The whole
yep,
premise is you can't get the top tiers
yeah,
unless you have the understanding of the bottom tiers. So when you're thinking about like course design and even in your syllabus, creating learning objectives or learning goals for your syllabus, you want to make sure that people will be getting the basic tier of remember and then go up
yeah,
that way because you don't want to start with create if they don't have the basics down. They'll be
that's right.
lost, they'll lose interest. Yeah.
Yep. And so for me, this 2 page document is the boil down of like 45 minutes of study, and I study fast, and reading 12 to 20 pages worth of content. And I'm like pulling the highest bits out so that I can work with somebody and explain what I see here because I remember it.
This is perfect. I think this is like all that we in Owners Club need to know,
Yeah,
really. And I
exactly.
like the second page where you gave examples of the
Yes, because
verbs.
that's really how you build a syllabus. The number one for me, I think of it as a pyramid. You can't put the top
Mhm.
triangle stone until you've got the one below it and below it and below it and below it. And so first people have to
Yeah.
be able to remember, then they have to be able to understand. So it's facts, it is understanding how those facts go together. How do you apply? So then you give some scenarios maybe like number one, do you remember the
Yep.
facts? Number two, do you know how to use those facts to make a judgment call? Analyzing is the next maturity level. Evaluate, good, bad, which one is best, and then create your own things based on a collection of random information. Can you create something in this learning topic?
It's really the ultimate goal that we want people to get to because once they can create, that shows a really deep, true understanding of
Well,
everything that you wanted them to get.
it depends on, and actually, I thought that too, but it depends on what level you're trying to teach to. A lot of times, so for
Yeah,
me,
that
we're
that
going to
is
talk about
true.
my syllabus is creative finance for realtors. I don't need them
Yeah.
to become a transaction consultant or any of that stuff. I need them to, number one, remember what is creative finance. Number two, understand some facts related to it and some risks, and then apply, maybe analyze and evaluate. Evaluate would be the very highest tier. Like,
I feel
is this
like,
a
yeah,
good
I
creative
feel
finance?
like once they get into the job, they'd be analyzing and evaluating, and probably they'll be doing some of that on some of your assessments within the course to
Hmm.
make sure that they have an understanding of how to do that, right?
Hmm. And
When they get
so,
out in the real world.
and you can bring me back if you want to that top one. But when we go, and remember, creative is the highest. So we go back down here. When I'm building a syllabus, I need to build learning objectives. Here are examples of verbs that
Yes.
would match the remember. So I want you to be able to, at the end of this module, I want you to be able to list the things, list the things needed in a creative finance contract, or recite something or outline. So
Yes.
those are the verbs that create like usable syllabus outcomes.
And give yourself permission to go back to this list. I don't have these things memorized. I
No, I live,
use
yeah.
this exact same thing when I'm creating my own course syllabi for the classes that I teach too, just because it's nice to, I don't like to memorize things that I can easily look at, if that makes sense.
Oh, exactly. Your highest and best use is to be familiar with and to know, well, to be able to evaluate, right? I need to be able to
Yeah.
understand exactly what I'm looking at and know where to find the correct answer or more information.
It's really utilizing the resources, right? You want to save time. Time is so important to me. I work a W-2 while I'm trying to do my real estate stuff on the side. So the more shortcuts I can create, the better.
Okay, excellent. So do you want to talk more about this, or do you want to jump straight into a syllabus or look at your tips?
I think let's go ahead and jump into your syllabus because I know you wanted me to take a look at it live without seeing it and give you my feedback.
Okay, so I have a 101. I have plans for a
Okay.
101, a 201, 202, and like 302 or something like that. So creative
Okay.
finance for realtors, outcomes. Is this big enough?
Yeah. And before we go into this, I have a question for you. Are your classes being taught online or in person or combination of both?
Combination. So my intention, good question. Let me stop the share for a moment. Let's just talk about that. My
Okay.
intention with this course, Creative Finance for Realtors, is that, well, I run a transaction consulting company. So I want them to be aware of it and to feel that it's safe and to know that they have a place they can turn. Like the
Okay.
summary of any of my teaching as a transaction consultant is, hey, you know a guy. Come this way.
I
So
love it. Yep.
be aware and then come to me. I don't expect you to become a master, but I do expect you to be aware of this. So Creative Finance for Realtors 101, and I haven't published any of this, is intended to be an in-person thing I can give and also a free online course. If you want to learn more, I might sell a 102 or a 201 as a paid advancement so that you can become
Perfect.
better at it.
That's your lead magnet. So that's perfect.
Yep.
Okay, let's hop. The reason I ask that is because how I design a course syllabus, there is some variations depending on if you're in person or
Okay.
online. I typically have just gotten to the point where even if I'm teaching an online class, I still develop the document as though it would be an online document because then it's like just done. And if later on I decide to have the class online, it's ready to go.
Love it. Okay. Well, I haven't touched
I'll
this since
explain more
February, so it's
about
been like
that.
8 months
It's been 8 months. Okay.
sitting here.
I'll
Like,
explain more about the differences with the online and how to make sure you like maximize your document for online when we get to my tips. But let's hop back to your document.
okay, excellent. Here we go.
So I'm going to read because this is the first time that I've looked at this. Okay, I mean, that's pretty good because I like that you put understand so you know that we are on that very first level of the
Yeah.
hierarchy.
And let me flip back to that for visual reference here.
Yeah.
Back up here. Did I go to understand? Yeah, I went straight to understand. I didn't go to remember. I went to understand as
Well,
my
go
first
back
level.
to your, but go back to because
I
it's
did use, so the highest level of this 101 course is understand. So we're doing
going to be
both
understand.
recall,
Okay.
remember, and understand. So we're going to get to level 2 in the
Because
first lesson.
I was gonna say because the recall is the remember
Yes, so
and the
recall,
identify is kind of
identify.
the remember.
Yeah, so this is the first layer of that
Okay.
hierarchy, and then we get to summarize and explain. Now, I
Okay.
think you're also supposed to really only have 5 objectives.
Yeah. So yeah. So the recommendation is 3 to 5 learning objectives.
Mhm.
2 to 4 is ideal. I
Yep.
try to stick with 3 when I can. 3 seems like a good number for me. So what you could do is you could consolidate some of these course level outcomes to make them shorter if you wanted to.
Okay.
So you could say like recall and identify common creative finance options in real estate and whether they're worth investigating further.
So the reason
And
I
it's
didn't
kind of
combine,
cheating and putting them like that, but
yeah, I agree. The reason I didn't combine those was because they're supposed to be testable.
gotcha.
And when you
So
combine them, you can't test. Well, you can get a partial
here,
pass.
here's how you can get around that, if you will. So you still let students know what they're going to be tested on, but you really only have 3 course objectives. So I want you to go through and I want you to think about what are the top 3 things you want students to be able to take away from your class. That's like high level. And then some of these, because when I have modules within my classes, each module has 2 to 3 learning objectives. So some of these other objectives that you have could be the module, like section 2.
Okay.
These are the learning objectives for section 2. So you have big picture, overarching course objectives. Try to keep it, I honestly try to keep mine to like 3. And then the more specific objectives that you have can be the learning objectives for each of your modules as you build your course. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I think I can combine those two pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, summarize why buyers and sellers would choose or avoid so really number 6 is my bonus one for me because I'm selling things. Recall that you can turn back to me. So it's really not a major course outcome, but I am listing it
I
here.
would say 5 and 6 are more like module or section outcomes versus overall course. And I would say probably number 3 could be a module outcome as well. I think the 3 that you bold faced
Yeah,
are
and
the
I
ones
bolded
that are
those
the most
because if I
important.
had to boil it down, if you got the
I'm
whip out and said
making you.
3 things only, it would be that. But where do I put that?
Okay.
Because I don't want to delete it and lose it. How about I do this? I'm going to do a strike through.
Don't delete it. I would, yeah, do strike through for now, but then I would take those and in the sections where you want those to be something that they are tested on,
Yeah.
you make those the learning objectives of that module, for example.
And you guys, eye contact with the camera. It is hard and it hurts to delete things that you worked on because a list of 6 things took me 45 minutes.
Mhm.
So I have, I don't know, like 8 or 9 hours into this thing, and we're still on the first paragraph of what I've built. But you have to be ruthless and cut, or split.
It's very important to do that because what you'll find is take the time, write everything down. But what you'll find, like what you found, is that you have 3 courses worth of materials and you're just getting to the bare bones of it. In your first module, that becomes your lead magnet, and then you're able to attract people to take your paid courses down the road.
Yep, perfect. So the due on sale clause is in there. That is a more advanced thing. Explain the due on sale clause. I just have that dropped in there because number 1, I think it's important to be aware of it. But number 2,
Yes.
I also want to tease from a sales perspective. I want to tease that there's more that you're like, oh crap, I need to know more about that. So for me, from a sales standpoint, I'm pushing the boundary of how many outcomes to put in. But from a
Well, I
straight up
mean,
learning perspective, 1, 2, and 4.
yeah, I think from an advertising standpoint, that's different, right? You're going to have a completely different approach than I wouldn't necessarily use your outcomes as your sales points, right? You're going to use different language because you don't want to use the more academic terms to like, draw those people into your funnels.
So should we go to the lessons?
Yes, so before we go to the lessons, let's hop over to my document because I want to talk about what's missing. So what I did is I went through one of my course syllabi, and then I kind of made a checklist of the things that I include on my course syllabus for each of my courses. Some of these things you may or may not want to include depending on how much access you want people to have to you. So what I always want to see is the actual name of your course,
Okay.
which you have. So that's good. Think about your meeting times, even if it's online, because even though it's online, you're meeting at a specific time and day. And then there's asynchronous where people can kind of log in at 2 o'clock in the morning if they wanted to and do the work. So the other thing, at the college level, we're required to have office hours. And this is something you can think about. If your students have questions, do you want to have office hours where they can hop into an open Zoom link? I would start with like a 1-hour Zoom meeting once a week and
Just an
see
open
how that
Q&A.
goes. Just open Q&A. Yeah.
Love it.
You just give them a chance to ask you anything. Course description, right? So the course description should be a little bit more about not necessarily the learning objectives, but what you think they should get out of the course. It's basically your sales pitch as to why people should take the course. Because
Yeah.
they're going to read oftentimes that course description is what you're going to be putting in your marketing materials as well. So I see the course description as more of a marketing piece.
I love it.
And then course learning goals or objectives. I like to include information on how to purchase them and or links if you have links available. For the stuff that we're going to be doing, we're probably going to be creating most of our own material. So if it's a download, the download link, things like that. Grading scale is important in my opinion because I'm the type A personality that needed to know exactly what I needed to do to get that A. So you can say, okay, on a scale of 1 through 4, a 4 is going to have these elements. A
Yep.
3 is going to have these elements. So students can see like, oh, I need to include this if I want to get that A level work. I think on your syllabus, did you already have this or you just had topics? I like including what activities, assignments, assessments
I
are
don't
going to
have
be.
that in there yet. No,
Okay.
mine is, let's see, let's look at, oh, I do have quizzes.
Like you have quizzes in there. So that's
Wait,
perfect. I would
can
like
we
to
go through
see
the
that.
outline? Like
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. Let's go through that line.
section versus lesson versus sub lesson?
So
Like what would you, what,
explain to me what your thought process was between sections and lessons.
I think I was using either ClickFunnels or Go High Level, and I wanted to name it consistent with the way they showed the outlines. So that's why I chose
Gotcha.
that naming. But what's a more universal hierarchy that you would set up?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In the academic world, we use the term modules for sections, but section is a very universal term. So I don't think you need to, if that's the language that is in Go High Level and you want to keep it consistent, I don't think there's a problem.
So let's build
Yeah.
the hierarchy. So a course contains
Okay.
modules or sections, which then
Yes.
inside of a module you have what?
Lessons is fine. I actually number my pages within a module 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. So that numbering system is perfect.
And then within a lesson you would have activities or anything like that?
So within the lesson, you're going to have your content. So that's going to be lecture. It could be video lecture. It could be sharing a video that someone else did embedded in that with a little explanatory text around what you're doing. And then it's also going to be quizzes for your class. You may have assignments. In my class, every single module has a discussion board. That's their group activity where they can talk to each other. Every module has the discussion board, some sort of quiz. And
Mhm.
when I go back and I look at my stats, most people take the quiz one time, but it releases some of that pressure because they know if they do bomb it, they can go back and take it again. So that's why I do that. We'll call this next section, the next 4 items, any course policies that you have, detailed course schedule. So I really like the fact that in your syllabus, you went through and you outlined everything. And
So
then
mine's going to be an
oh, go
online
ahead.
class though.
You can still put down like by week 1, I want you to have this done, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay.
And then always include the statements. This syllabus and class schedule may be modified at any time per the instructor's discretion. So you want to make sure that you have that escape clause written in there just in case things come up. Stanford has an actually really thorough syllabus tutorial website. And I
Nice.
love this. Late work will be penalized by 50%. Instead, you can say late work is still eligible for 50% partial credit.
I love that.
Um,
That's like when instead of saying sorry I'm late, saying thank you for being patient.
I also have 3 course rules, I call them, and they're simple. Show up, do the work, participate actively. I use those because they're super simple. And I tell my students, if you do these things, you're gonna pass my class. And that's very accessible, very understandable. Also being specific, transparent, and flexible about your grading policies. When I'm teaching online, I actually have suggested due dates so my students who need deadlines can stay on track. But I also allow them to work at their own pace. People are generally turning it in as they go. But I had a student who got in a car accident and she was very happy that she had the extra week to turn in the assignments and not get penalized.
I love it. So how do we adapt? Because your stuff was really official, and I'm going to be down to
Yes.
earth. I'm not going to go to that level of detail because I'm not teaching a college course and I'm not hosting
Yeah.
in-person classes and grading people, and I'm not going to have written assignments to grade. Although if I did, some of the what you were saying would be applicable. But I think most of the people who are going to watch this video, at least for me, are going to be online course creators who want the basics
Yes.
of how do I effectively build an online course that is going to deliver what I'm promising.
The key things that you want to do is you want to start with the end in mind. So you start with those 3 major course objectives that you want your students to get out
So
of.
back to
I
Bloom's
think
taxonomy, study the taxonomy,
Yes.
Figure out which level of that pyramid you want to get. With your 101 course, you probably can't go way up to the top of the pyramid. So first one or
No.
two levels and use the verbs to help shape what it is and narrow it down to 3, maximum 5. We say 3 because we know you're going to cheat, right?
I wouldn't even say 5. I would say 2 to 4 and make it 3.
See, there you go.
Especially because, okay, another thing to think about with Bloom's taxonomy is you don't want to overwhelm people.
Yep.
I think if you have too many course objectives, learning goals, you're going to overwhelm people. You want to be focused.
Yeah.
You want your first course to be so good that they want to come back and take your next one and pay for it. So
Now,
you want it to be like, give them actionable things that they can take out and go work on now. And then, give them enough so they can take action, but then they're going to have to come back as they take action to get more information from you, if
I
that
think
makes sense.
one other concern that I have, because I'm the one that has the level 10 knowledge, how do I make sure that they want to come back for more? Because if I only feed them this little chunk and they don't see the big picture, so I think it's important for me to show them that, hey, here's the chunk that I'm going to give you, but it is a part of this big picture. You can continue learning, but this is essential basic learning for you. There's also a 102 course, et cetera, if you want to continue learning.
And that is
Yeah.
something we can think about, right? Because we're developing our one thing, but you could section out, like when you're brainstorming and you're writing down all those things, don't throw them away and put them in another document, because then you can build your next course from there. And if you have any sort of graphic orientation, it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be an outline like what you have in your document. You can say, like, this is the content we're covering in course A. We also, if you like this course, we also have course B and C, and here's the course outlines. That's perfect to have those course outlines so they can kind of see like what topics will be covered in
Yeah,
the future.
I like it. Have you seen Alex Hormozy's books?
I have not read any of his books yet.
They're pretty great, and I think it's important to know that we have permission to use hand sketches. Make it not chicken scratch, so maybe you have to redraw it, but it is okay to use a hand sketch to
Yeah.
to illustrate a concept and say, hey, this is you at the end of the course, and then we zoom way out, and you've only gone this far along the whole journey, just so you're aware.
Yeah. And the thing of it is even tools like PowerPoint, they have amazing graphics that you can adapt to whatever you want to use them for.
And I think it's important not to try too hard. People get the
Yeah.
concept. And if you get
Yeah.
focused on this one thing, you'll have a course that you wrote 8 months ago and you've done nothing about.
And that's the key thing, right? We want to take action. You could spend hours trying to make your course materials look perfect. That's not what we want. We want you to have the basics down so you can go out and put that course out in the world and have people start taking it so they can
Right.
learn from you.
That's right. Perfect. Becky, how can people get a hold of you? Do you want to even be gotten a hold of?
You can get a hold of me.
For the people that know where to find you already, just reach out to you. The
You
rest of
can find
YouTube
me
to be
on
finding you?
Instagram.
Okay.
I just finally got my YouTube situated. I just have to put videos out there. So on YouTube and Instagram, I am at Becky Plaza Peace. So you can look at me on those platforms there. Instagram is up and running. YouTube will be shortly.
Love it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.